Tighten the handle.
They're the gallery of freaks. Stop! Look through the doorway. They're looking at Grace McDaniels, the mule-faced girl, Priscilla, the bearded lady, Emmett, the elephant-skinned man. A whole presentation of freaks. Real people. The strangest people on earth. Born to live. Yes, they're on the inside right now, and this is the Museum of Oddities, and you're just in time go now. You're going to see nature's greatest mistakes. They're looking at the face of Grace McDaniels right now, the mule-faced girl, the pin-headed boy, the fat man weighing over 600 pounds. Don't miss this unexpected horror of a lifetime. So get your ticket and come in.
About 9 years ago, two gentlemen from Brunswick, Georgia, came into the office of the Berrien Historical Foundation asking a very peculiar question. Had I ever heard of the Gator children? They said their father had originally lived in Berrien County and often mentioned the Gator children, stating they had alligator features with webbed feet, alligator skin, and crawled around like alligators. I responded that I had never heard of them before and assumed it was an urban legend or such. It was just a few weeks later that an elderly lady from Berrien County came into the office and asked if there had been any articles written about the Gator children of Berrien County. You mean there were really children that lived in the county at one time who were known as Gator children? I asked surprisingly. Oh, yes, the lady responded. My mother used to live just down the road from them out in West Berrien. She went on to explain that there were two of them, one girl and one boy. She thought their names were Maddie and Betty, and that they may have been Warrens or raised by a Warren family. Thus began a very interesting search that led me to a better understanding of the oddities of nature and how earlier generations responded to these unique children. Such fascination with these natural oddities has been an attraction to the American public at least as early as the middle of the 19th century. This fascination was satisfied by willing purveyors in the traveling carnivals and circus sideshows. Banners spread across the Midway promoted the most outlandish exhibition of these oddities, which became known as freak shows in the common vernacular. Alligator people, part human, part reptile, were common among the attractions. Newspapers in the latter part of the 1800s were often filled with exotic news items from around the country. It seems that most of the alligator people were native of the South, including Georgia. This item from the Daily Phoenix, Columbia, South Carolina, December 19, 1872. The Georgia alligator children. Among the curiosities to be seen at the fair in Savannah, Georgia, will be the three children, now grown, of a poor family residing in Clinch County, known as the alligator children, on account of their external resemblance to that amphibious creature. The first child has a scaly skin, and when lying down, her actions are very similar to those of an alligator. The other two are not so distinctly marked, yet are similar in appearance and actions to their sister. They walk with difficulty. Their usual style of locomotion is crawling, but when erect, they walk upon the tips of their toes. Their natural position is a recumbent one, and in that are they only at ease. Another news item from the October 19th, 1881 Forest Republican newspaper of Tionesta, Pennsylvania, stretches the believability even more. Alligator children. A southern paper gives an account of a woman near Live Oak, Florida, who was pursued and very much frightened by a huge alligator. Subsequently, she gave birth to twins, both males. They were perfect children down to their waists and complete alligators below, tail and all. There are short, webbed feet and legs at the lower portion of the abdomen like alligators. They crawl with their hands, dragging themselves about just as an alligator does. They make a squealing and articulate noise. The mother has a large tank filled with water in which she keeps them, and they live nearly all the time in it. They are now 14 or 15 years old. Comparatively few outside of the immediate neighborhood knew of the case until the enterprising newspaper man got hold of it. The mother has refused large offers of money to exhibit her children. Each year, the features described in the national news clippings became more exaggerated. This item is from the October 11th, 1883 issue of the Times-Democrat, Orangeburg, South Carolina. Half human, half alligator. 2 of the 5 children of John McDonald of Florida are described as half human and half alligator. These children, says a reporter who has seen them, are now 9 years of age. Their bodies, arms, and heads, from the hips up, are perfectly formed, while from the hips down, they present the identical appearance of an alligator, having a perfectly formed tail about 5 feet in length, together with the hind feet and legs of the alligator. They crawl around on their hands and feet, converse intelligently, and seem to enjoy life very much. They live part of the time in the water, which they enjoy very much, using their tails while swimming, the same as the alligator, to propel their bodies. They are healthy, good-looking, and well-developed children, and outside of their love for the water, their mode of living is the same as that of a human being. Finally, this January 1st, 1897 issue of the Louisiana Populist, Natchitoches, Louisiana, gives the most detailed and outlandish claims regarding the reptile children. Georgia's alligator children. They were born with scales and other saurian markings. Down in a faraway southern portion of Georgia is an extensive swamp called Grand Bay. It is a branch of the Great Okefenokee Swamp. On the borders of this swamp live a pair of freaks, like of which are not to be found elsewhere. They were known as the alligator children, and are the offspring of a man and woman of the poorest class of Piney Woods crackers. The eldest of the alligators is now 23 years of age and in the best of health, except for her deformity. Shortly before the birth of this child, the mother, Mrs. James Dottie, was frightened by suddenly coming upon a huge alligator. The little girl, shortly thereafter, born to her, was in appearance of half human and half reptile. Her head and face was elongated, her jaws protruded. There was only a very scant growth of hair on her head, and down her back extended a row of dark callocytes like the scales on an alligator's back. She had a well-defined tail several inches long, and her fingers and toes bore an unmistakable resemblance to an alligator's claws. About a year later, a second child was born, a boy, and he showed the same peculiar markings, only they were not so strongly defined as those of the girl. Both children were mutes, and all efforts of the parents to teach them to utter intelligible words were unavailing. The girl made her wants known by a sort of whining sound, and when angry, would snarl like an alligator. She was very unruly. The boy was more tractable, but both he and his sister displayed all the characteristics of the alligator. The girl would be now about 5 feet high if she could stand upright, but the same number of feet long would be the more appropriate way to describe her longitudinal dimensions. The jaws bear a strong resemblance to those of an alligator, and curving claws, calloused by long use in creeping about the floor, disfigure her hands and feet. The boy is more docile and exhibits a higher degree of intelligence and will accept sweetmeats, holding them in his jaws as he crouches in the corner, munching them with evident satisfaction. He too creeps on all fours about the house. The other children of the family are all of average intelligence and show no kinship with their less fortunate brother and sister. This last article most likely is detailing the features of the same 1872 children of Clinch County. However, none have reference to the Gator children of Berrien County. The condition of which all supposed Gator children were afflicted is known as ichthyosis. Ichthyosis is a genetic skin disorder characterized by a dry skin condition which forms large, thick scales over most of the body. In severe cases, the condition manifests itself at birth, accompanied by deafness, unusual teeth structure, and lack of skeletal development, which usually limits the mobility to crawling. One of the most famous alligator skin sideshow attractions was Tony, the alligator boy. His deformity was primarily in his skin condition, but he still had full mobility and was able to function normally in most social settings. But consider the challenges that affected these young children and their family throughout their lives, especially if their condition was severe. What demands must be made for their care, not only in childhood, but in their adolescent and adult lives. In 1900, the means to provide for their immediate and long-term care was often to exhibit their oddity with the rest of the world. My first verification of the existence of the Gator children of Berrien County was an article in the Nashville Herald dated December 22, 1905. Therein it states, Mr. and Mrs. Jack Cook returned Tuesday from Tampa, where they have been attending the Tampa Fair and exhibiting their deformed children, known as the alligator children. They get $200 a month and expenses, so we have been told. They will leave for another tour about the 1st of January. In 1900, $200 a month would be the same value as $6,000 a month in today's dollars. With this verification, I was able to confirm that the Gator children were offspring of Jack Cook. James Jackson Cook was the son of Elijah Cook and Arinda Chandler. He is shown here on the right. In 1882, he married Melissa M. Lewis in Berrien County. The 1900 census shows Jack and Melissa living in District 1148 of East Berrien, near Avra Mill. They are listed with their children: Bart M., the M stood for Madison, born 1883, Luana, 1885, Leela, 1887, Betty, born 1889, and William M., 1899. Bart Madison, age 17 at the time, and Betty, age 11, were the Gator children. In the April 26, 1907 issue of the Nashville Herald, it states, Mrs. Jack Cook and one of her alligator children are in Norfolk, ready for the opening of the big Jamestown exposition. The 1907 Jamestown exposition was a huge fair consisting of numerous buildings that housed displays of entrepreneurship, cultural variety, and other contemporary subjects. One of the most popular exhibit halls at the exposition was referred to as, of all things, Hellgate, which contained many oddities of nature. It is most likely that Mrs. Cook had included Betty as part of that exhibit. For whatever reason, Betty was the child most frequently put on display. This is the only known photo of Betty, or of either Gator children. The photo was taken about 1915, when she was about 26 years old. In a 1908 Jacksonville Times newspaper article titled Alligator Girl, it states one of the most wonderful studies of human anatomy is shown in the alligator girl on the midway and occupying the first tent inside the entrance. She is 18 years old and was born in Berrien County, Georgia. The girl neither talks or walks, and her mode of progress is to crawl like an alligator. The markings of her entire body show the wonderful similarity to the giant reptile accomplished by nature. Two prominent physicians who examined the alligator girl yesterday pronounced her the most marvelous of all the curious evolutions of nature. Jack and Melissa Cook spent weeks and sometimes months at a time traveling about the eastern half of the United States following the carnival circuit. A news item in the Nashville Herald, May 7, 1909, indicated that Mr. and Mrs. Jack Cook, with their alligator children, spent Wednesday night in Sparks on their way to Illinois for an 8-month tour. In the 1910 census, Jack and Melissa were living in Nashville on Washington Street. The only children living with them at the time were Madison, age 27, name listed as such, Betty, age 20, and William M., age 11. By 1913, the parents appeared to have limited the feature show to include only Betty the alligator girl. They were freshening up their travel gear as well. In the Nashville Herald, dated March 7, 1913, it read, Mr. and Mrs. Jack Cook, who travel with the Barcoots Carnival, exhibiting their alligator girl, had a new wagon and outfit made. They joined the carnival in Valdosta last week for a season's run. The sales pitch that the Cooks used to promote their exhibition was detailed in a 1915 medical report titled The Medical Summary. Therein, the author, Dr. F. Griffith, recounts his inspection of Betty the alligator girl at a sideshow booth in St. Augustine, Florida. Betty the alligator girl is a young human female shown with her mother, who acts as a lecturer. Her mother informed the auditors gathered about her stand that the exhibit was her daughter, the fourth child of 7, all healthy and well. The girl was born in southern Georgia 24 years ago. She neither walked nor talked, but crawls or must be carried. She said the girl sheds her skin twice a year and preferred a diet of raw meat or fish. She said she styled and exhibited as the only living alligator girl because the girl's skin from the crown of the head to the soles of her feet was plated and resembles an alligator's hide. The doctor confirmed the plating was real and as described upon careful, close, and extended inspection. The mother stated that during the 7th month of her pregnancy, while crossing a single log footbridge close by her little cabin home in the swamp, a 12-foot alligator had risen from the marsh, seizing her skirt. Breaking away, she raced screaming to the house. After recovering from her fright, she had no after effect until the child was born, marked with the unique cutaneous condition. There is no crusting, nor bleeding, nor cracking. The crevices are regular and permanent, the plaques outlined as the creasing of the palm of one's hand. The accompanying photograph fails to show the true state of affairs upon the surface of the girl's body. Just how long the Cooks continued to exhibit either of the children is not known. However, at the time of the 1920 census, the family was living on Berrien Street in Nashville. Jack's occupation was a carpenter. Melissa's occupation was none. Jack and Melissa both listed as age 50, but were closer to 58. They are shown living with just 2 of their children. They were the Gator children. Madison, now called Maddie, was listed as being 32, but actually closer to 37. Betty was shown as being 23. Her actual age was closer to 31. In the May 23, 1929 issue of the Nashville Herald, the death of Melissa Lewis Cook was reported. Mrs. Mary Melissa Cook died May 15, 5:30 a.m. Great sorrow was cast over our town and county when the news spread of the death of Mrs. M.M. Cook. Mrs. Cook was born March 9, 1862, 8 miles east of Nashville. She was the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. John Lewis. She was united in marriage October 5, 1882, to J.J. Cook and have made Berrien County their home since. Mrs. Cook has been ill several years but was confined to her bed since December, gradually growing worse till the end came. The funeral services were conducted by Reverend Duncan McCraney and internment at Long Bridge. The pallbearers were Chester Warren, Jack Warren, William Buckholtz, Leroy Myers, Norman Lewis, and Herman Myers. During her life, she did many Christ-like deeds. There was no mention of the Gator children by name, or even the fact she was the mother of the Gator children. However, this card of thanks was published in the same issue. We wish to thank everyone who in any way rendered a kindness in word or deed during the illness and bereavement of our wife and mother. We especially wish to thank Mr. W. H. Tigert for the extreme kindness and consideration of Betty and Maddie. May God's richest blessings rest on you all. Mr. J.J. Cook, Mr. and Mrs. Mac Warren, Mrs. J.H. Knobb, and Miley Cook. According to her death certificate, Melissa died from a leaking heart. She had been attended to by Doctors L.A. Carter and W.J. Dixon. Her occupation was listed as a farmer. W.H. Tigert was the undertaker. She was buried on May 16th, the day after her death. In the 1930 census, Jack Cook, age 66, is a widower living in Nashville with his two children, Matt and Betty, as well as his niece, Arizona Barber, age 35, also widowed. Arizona was listed as Jack's housekeeper and helped care for the adult Gator children. Maddie was 47 and Betty was listed as 32, but actually closer to 41. Over the course of their lifetime, Jack and Melissa Cook accumulated a number of pieces of property, including several residences in Nashville. In 1936, the Superior Court granted Jack full authority over the 2/5 survivorship estate of Madison and Betty Cook, citing their mental capacity as imbeciles. By 1940, Jack had purchased 66 acres of land on land lot 183 and 184 of the 10th District, just off the Chaserville Road near the county line in West Berrien. The 1940 census shows Jack Cook living next to Mac and Luana Warren, Jack's daughter and son-in-law. All members of the Cook household were more accurate in their ages than earlier census records. Jack Cook was 78, Maddie was 56, and Betty was 50. All were probably in failing health. Arizona Barber was keeping house, and Mr. L. Jolly was maintaining the farm. The housekeeper and farmhand married that same year. In 1941, Jack Cook deeded his property in West Berrien to his daughter, Luana Warren, wife of M.D. Warren Sr., for the sum of love and $1. He probably died shortly thereafter and is buried beside his wife at Long Bridge Cemetery. Luana Warren took the Gator children in and cared for her siblings until their deaths. This image is of Luana Cook Warren, sister of Betty and Maddie, about the age of 90. She died in 1983 at the age of 97. The exact date of the passing of the Gator children is not known without further research. Upon their deaths, Maddie and Betty were buried in a very simple family plot alongside their parents at the Long Bridge Cemetery. Each marker has a plain one-line inscription of each of their names with no dates. The parents' names are inscribed: James Jack Cook and Mary Melissa Cook. The children were known by Betty, Madison, Maddie or Matt throughout their lifetime. Their markers are inscribed simply Betty Cook and Matthew Cook. However, their memory and legacy that remain in this small South Georgia community will always be remembered with the curiosity that comes from such a mythical name as the Gator Children of Berrien County. I hope you have found this unusual history both enlightening and enjoyable. Thank you for coming, and have a good evening.